Chapter the 2nd, Creation. Now, the Titans long searched for the shining answer, yet, with all their effort, it seemed as though they were no closer to finding their intended goal. In fact, they didn't even have any proof it truly existed. Well, nothing more substantial than the logical, but perhaps incorrect reasoning of the principle of hierarchy. So, in order to restore morale, the king gathered all of them to himself, and he told them,
"We have traveled far beyond the low-hanging tree, and yet we are no closer to our goal than when we first began. Should we not rest for a time and take our leisure before continuing on this arduous journey?"
And so they did. The king drew up plans for a great game parlor where they might wait out the millennia as they regained their strength. Of course, the king was a craftsman without measure, for he was fire himself. Yet he did not build these games, for they required things he could not produce. For something to be truly a game, it cannot be impossible to win. Yet the king was perfect, flawless. Anything he produced would be as such. The games would be impossible to win. And so he merely provided the plans for the parlor, and told the others what they might do in order to construct it. Now, much of this work fell onto the outcast among them. He was weak, he was sickly. Still, he was the great maker, and so, when the Titans chose to build their game parlor, it was he who led them. It was he who built the most complex parts, those that even the principle of hierarchy could not quite understand, could not quite build. They were beyond her and her systematic deductions. And so it would come to pass that the Titans would construct their game parlor, yet they required something to power it. That something was creation. That something was the world. How, of course, would a world power a game? Well, it's quite simple. They created living things. And these living things, of course, lived, and they died, and they lived again, in a perfect circle of reincarnation. Now, it was not quite so simple as having living things dying. That wasn't the source of power. Rather, these things lived, and they wanted to live. They did not know about reincarnation. So, naturally, they didn't want to die. And they prayed to the Titans to save them. Of course, this was the plan. The Titans didn't save them. They needed those prayers, because that was the purest form of energy. Those prayers that would go forever unanswered would fuel their games while they waited and gathered their strength to once again seek out the shining answer. Of course, it wasn't so simple as that. The world was a big place. It needed keepers to repair it sometimes, and to keep everything moving smoothly. And so the Titans crafted the gods as perfect divine janitors to upkeep their machinery, which, incidentally, they sometimes destroyed. After all, nothing can stop Isidoros. Nothing. And so, as Isidoros rampaged, or as Adrian rampaged, or any of them really even just kind of passed through the area, things would naturally be destroyed. So, the gods were kept around in order to repair. Of course, it wasn't like the Titans were going to leave the gods unsupervised. They needed something else to keep them in line. Of course, they'd created this entire world in order to play games and relax. They weren't going to watch over the gods themselves. So they created some gods who were beyond gods. They created the Celestials, who would soon come to reign above all other gods. First, of course, was their leader, the Sun. Now, in the early days of creation, as in Zenmu, there was a sun. There had to be a sun. Without a sun, there was no light. Yet, the sun was not as you would expect it. For you see, this was the green sun, Ligeia, the great heart of the king of the Titans. Now, Ligeia, as was the king of the Titans himself, completely flawless, the green light emitted from this sun was perfectly without shadow. And of course, the shadow of all things could not fully exist. He definitely was not happy about this situation, and so he endeavored to resolve it. He came to the king, and he said,
"Surely this creation is not yet complete without the touch of its grand master architect. My liege, your light is great, but this world, this earth, is not worthy of it. Withdraw your heart to heaven, to shine as a lamp in glory forevermore. Instead, construct a lesser light to be the crown jewel over this creation, as perhaps a perfect prince to rule over the gods as you do over we."
Unfortunately for the Shadow of all things, the king of the Titans took this very seriously. For you see, their world was a creation that all the Titans had worked on, yet he had contributed nothing to it, seeing himself as the, of course, architect, as the Shadow had said. He didn't need to contribute to it, but if he was going to contribute to it, then his contribution had to be greater than the entirety of the world that they had built without him. And so he took his purest green flames and sought out Cytherea, the divine ignition, who had woken the Titans from their slumber to begin with. He gave this flame to her and commanded her to purify it again and again and again and again and again. And then, eventually, the green flame was no more. It shone purest white. And in that moment, there was a shadow for the first time. So much greater than the green light of Ligeia was this pure white flame, that everything else looked black in comparison to it. Now the king then went to Autothon, the great maker who had constructed the games and much of creation. He took from him a device that was not yet complete, and he stored this pure white flame in the device, and it burst into life. This light grew golden in color. It became the sun. And aboard this great battleship of truly epic proportions stood a man, the king of the gods, soul incarnate. Of course, the king of the Titans would not merely allow this to go on. He could not allow his greatest work to go untested. And so he worked with the other Titans to develop new diversions for them, but life-threatening tests for this new king of the gods. And so they tested him. But he passed every test. He passed them too quickly, so they had to invent more tests. And then came the final test. They sent him beyond creation, out into the depths of the realm that had been created by the shadow of all things, made manifest by his initial light. And he was submerged in darkness. And for a time, it seemed that the light might dim. But then, the shadows vanished. And truly, Cytherea announced, was this sun unconquered. And, unfortunately, it would seem, his trials had made him too powerful. He was guardian of creation, meant to protect it and to rule the gods who repaired it. Yet, he was too powerful. His very light was destroying it. While it was fine for the green sun Ligeia to simply rotate around, back and forth across the sky, this could not be with Sol, for he was too glorious and his light burned the landscape. It could not withstand him for many more than a few hours. So the Titans knew they must create another champion of the gods. This time Oramus, the eldest, the dragon beyond the world, went to Cytherea, whom he had known of old. And he had her reach within him and remove the possibilities, an infinite number of these new gods. And he had her make them fight each other and devour each other until but 5 were left. And then another ate those 5. And this was Luna. Draped in a cloak of night, she went to Sol, and she covered his eyes. And in that moment, the world witnessed its first solar eclipse as the silver chair overcame the day star. Relieved of his duties temporarily, Sol set for the first time, and there was night. Yet Luna was from beyond, within the realms of Oramus. She called something. The gods did not know what happened. The Titans did not know what happened. But the number of Celestials who ruled over the other gods suddenly increased by 5. These were not the others that Luna had devoured. These were the 5 Maidens of Fate, the Maiden of Journeys, Mercury, the Maiden of Serenity, Venus, the Maiden of Battles, Mars, the Maiden of Secrets, Jupiter, the Maiden of Endings, Saturn. These 5 gods suddenly appeared as monitors of fate, which had previously gone worked by the Titans themselves. They were convenient. In fact, they were convenient enough that the Titans completely overlooked that they appeared out of nowhere. And so did the Titans, fully assured that their creation would remain perfect forever, retreated to heaven to play their games, the games of divinity.